Hello guys, this is Ace and Beaky here, talking to you on this beautiful night, and I just came to the conclusion that maybe we should start putting into practice the idea of giving Western properties the anime treatment. And of course, this has been done before. Sometimes people here in the West will try to make something that is Western, but they'll imitate animation whenever they make it, and that can be a good or a bad thing depending on who's doing it. But the whole thing that kind of started this line of thought, and I had this line of thought even like years ago when I was in Afghanistan and I was introduced to anime, is that with Artemis Fowl, and it being like something that's like a young adult novel that young adults liked, along with things like Animorphs and Redwall and Lemony, and even stuff that's even more for children like Lemony Snicket, how some of these things, they don't get the respect they deserve. I think Percy Jackson, also a lot of people talk about that one too, although I haven't read that. My main thing is Animorphs, and to a lesser Animorphs and Redwall are my thing. But to a lesser extent, I did have some good feelings for Artemis Fowl. And it just seems to me that a lot of young adult content doesn't get the respect it deserves in Western media. Western media is missing some gears in its gear selector. If Western media was a bike, it's missing some gears, and it's very hard for it to switch gears, and those gears are rusty as hell. There's still this thing called the cartoon ghetto, and even though it's seen some improvements, it's seen a lot of improvements with good shows, the cartoon ghetto still exists. And if I was just going to summarize what the cartoon ghetto is that with cartoons, it's black and white. Either it's for kids / family, either it's Saturday morning / Disney shows, or it's South Park. That the vast majority of anything animated is either for little kids, or maybe they up the quality for parents that are stuck with the little kids so they can get something out of it. But it's either the Princess Frog and a Saturday morning cartoon, or it's South Park. And that there's hardly anything in between. Now, sometimes whenever there was something Saturday morning or Disney that was really good quality, that even snuck in a few innuendos, people, who are teenagers and even adults liked it because it was that deep and it could hold its own without a TV-14 rating. I think a lot of people think of Batman the Animated Series whenever they think of that. That it's like, it doesn't matter that it's rated G or PG, you don't feel like a little kid when you watch it. I'll give DC some credit because some of their stuff that was made by the people who made Batman the Animated Series and Justice League and Superman, it held up throughout the years with various dips in quality, of course. But the thing is that it seems to me that even though we as a society have outgrown the cartoon ghetto, a lot of Hollywood hasn't. And the thing is that one area that seems to be kind of hit in the cartoon ghetto, even though it's not necessarily a cartoon, is the stuff that's young adult. Stuff that's basically for teenagers, for older kids and smarter kids. Stuff that would, basically be like Avatar: The Last Airbender, but it has a Star Wars edge. But in the book department, in the novels. And there's a lot of beloved franchises in the young adult market, especially by Scholastic and all them, that they never seem to get the respect that they deserve because Hollywood can't think outside the box. Hollywood doesn't know how to make a show that often that's technically for kids and teenagers without turning it into Power Rangers meets Goosebumps. Or maybe if it is for teenagers, they'll turn it into Dawson's Creek. That's what Nickelodeon did with Animorphs. And to me, Animorphs is not Dawson's Creek, Power Rangers, and Goosebumps if they had a baby. Although I could see how some people would see it might be that way at first glance of the books. Animorphs is more like Red Dawn with some of the banter of Homeward Bound, and some it would be and some of the mature themes of V, the original miniseries. That's what Animorphs is to me. That it's like whenever I read Animorphs, I felt that, like, the banter between Marco and Rachel, or Marco and Cassie. Think about Homeward Bound with the talking animals, and yes, that's a family show, that's a kid's show, but that would just be one element of it, because it's got the animals with human voices giving smart-ass comments to each other. But the conflict is more akin to V, the original miniseries, and Red Dawn. But if you replace the shooting and the normal human martial arts with animals and aliens that have blades on their arms or blenders for their mouths, slashing each other up and having blood of all shades, red, blue, green, splash all over the place at times. That was one that had morally gray gut punch moments, as Paparina said. Animorphs is not Power Rangers meets Goosebumps, nor is it that meets Dawson's Creek. And I don't blame everybody who made Animorphs TV. I'm using this as an example. The director had the person who wanted to work on it, the kids who worked on it, the actors, they were good. The guy who was making it, he knew that it was scary, and he wanted it to be dark and scary. Even if he had to tone down the violence, you can still have the tone. But he also knew that Nickelodeon didn't know what it had, so it tried to associate it with something that was just barely related to it, and it wanted to turn it into another Goosebumps, because people don't know. People learn by association. They learn by building bridges between what they don't know with what they do know. Apparently, the concept of treating books like Animorphs and Artemis Fowl the proper way, as in, one, it should be a series, and two, you don't turn Artemis Fowl into another Spy Kids movie, into another Kim Possible, if that's not what he really is. If that's if that's the closest thing he is to what you already know, and then you use that to kind of build a bridge, and then jump into it and be faithful to it, that's fine. Because it would kind of be like, okay, if they did a better job with Artemis Fowl, it would be like, okay, this is a good show, but I can tell that Disney made it because I'm getting a little bit of hint of Spy Kids, a little bit of hint of Kim Possible. But besides that, the show's good. You can do it. I mean, for crying out loud, Black Panther was a good movie, and they focused more on it being faithful to the comics. And now, you could kind of tell that there were a couple of parts of it that kind of accidentally felt like a little Lion King-ish, a little Narnia-ish near the ends for me. And to me, that just shows that, it's kind of like, oh, it can't help but feel a little bit Disney-influenced at some point. It's not that hard, people. It's not that hard to take something like Artemis Fowl and Animorphs. Those are the ones that I've read. At least some of them. I read 36 Animorphs books, although it was a long time ago, and I read a couple of the Artemis Fowl books, although it was it was about a decade ago. But the thing is that it's not that hard. These young adult novels are not that hard to translate into a good TV show. But apparently, this one combination of a show that's not R-rated, that's aimed at people between the ages of 12 and 20, as the primary audience. It's aged between, I'm going to say, either 8 and 15. Yeah, between the ages of 8 and 15, kind of the smarter kids, more mature kids. It shouldn't be that hard to make. It's like you can have a show that's very serious and you can tone down the gore. You can have a show that's aimed at young people and it's not a Saturday morning cartoon. It's not a teen romantic comedy like Dawson's Creek. It's not a soap opera for teenagers. And it's like, why do you have such a hard time doing this? And then I was thinking to myself, Forrest, why was anime so good that, like, whenever you were stuck downrange in Afghanistan and you had discovered anime for yourself because some people tried to hook you up with the good stuff, that they showed you some anime and then you were thinking, man, I wish that people in Japan would try their hand at making an anime of Animorphs, an anime of Artemis Fowl, an anime of Redwall, and a whole lot of other stuff, it would get the anime treatment. Why? Because even though Japan has its tropes and it can do stuff that's crazy, Japan likes to reach outside the box, and it likes to connect with things that are new. Oh yeah, they're obsessed with their own stuff, but they also like to incorporate their new stuff. And the thing is, I digress, how hard is it for Western audiences to do it? Okay, give up on the Western audiences. They don't have, not the Western audiences, the Western movie makers, Disney, all them. They don't have the internal organs to make something like Artemis Fowl, or Nickelodeon doesn't have the internal organs or the parts of their brain to make something like Animorphs. They don't know what they have, because the only thing that teenagers are supposed to like are Dawson's Creek soap operas, and the only thing kids are supposed to like are either Disney movies or shows meant to sell toys to little boys. That's it. They can't wrap their mind around it. But Japan lives in that spot. You know how I told you that, like, in America, the cartoon ghetto is kind of feudalism with cartoons? It's that it's either Saturday morning cartoons / Disney, or it's South Park, to where it's like, you know, almost between the ages of 14 and 25, you're not supposed to watch cartoons until you have a kid again. Maybe you can watch South Park or Family Guy, but, you know, until you become like until you become a parent with a kid, being a kid again, you can't watch anything. You can't watch anything. Well, anime lives in that area. Anime animates a bunch of stuff, and even though, like I said, anime has its schlock, anime has its tropes, and anime would definitely leave its mark on it, like you would if they made an Animorphs Animemorphs, they would actually, you know, you would realize that it's an anime. It would feel influenced by Japan in some degree. But even then, whenever you get the right group of people in Japan, you have a higher success rate, a higher crit rate, from my point of view, of the Japanese people being more respectful with the source material they have, even though they do mark their territory, even though you can tell, yeah, the people who made this, they were a Japanese anime company. You can kind of see a couple of tropes sneak in, but it would still mostly be trying to do a good job that at least somewhat respected the material, even if they respected it from a different point of view. And that's the thing, is that I actually kind of feel that this would apply to Narnia. We've tried to have so many things with Narnia. BBC Narnia was pretty good, although the effects weren't that great. Disney Narnia was okay, but the effects were good, but they tried to make Lord of the Rings light. Again, it's all about a cash grab. It's all about capitalizing on somebody else's success. That's not bad, but you had to understand that Narnia, although you could draw parallels between J.R.R. Tolkien's work and the movie 300 because of the Greek mythology and all that and whatever. And yes, I know Tolkien and Lewis were friends. They were still different things. And you know that they were different things. When you read Narnia, you don't just think of Diet Lord of the Rings. You don't just think of Harry Potter for Christians. You don't just think of the Passion of the Christ mixed with the Lion King, okay? That's not what it's meant to be. But Disney can't do that because, one, they have a bunch of people who, whenever you bring up anything Christian, they either freak out about it because it either has to be evil McEvil right-wing or self-emasculating, self-hating communist. I mean, it's to the point to where Hollywood is so afraid of doing that they left out how J.R.R. Tolkien was actually quite religious, and they left it out of his movie. And it was like, I don't want you to get preachy about his Christianity, but if it influenced him, I want to hear about it. Just like if this philosopher was Buddhist, or if this actor was pagan or whatever, if their spirituality played a role, we should understand how it played a role. But Hollywood left that out. Even though Japan doesn't have a lot of Christians in it, I actually think that they would be able to show more respect for somebody else's culture, even if they didn't fully understand it. So you know what? I honestly think that maybe the people behind Studio Ghibli should be some of the best people to make a Narnia anime. And even though Studio Ghibli is mostly seen as whimsical and lighthearted, you know that they've got a couple of PG-13 movies under their belt, and Princess Mononoke was very violent. So, and Princess Mononoke kind of had the man versus nature and the supernatural spirits thing that we see in Narnia. So, if they kind of got into kind of Princess Mononoke mode, they could actually make a good Narnia anime, because the guy was in touch with it. He would understand what the spiritual message is that the author intended, but he'd be able to approach it from a neutral point of view, and the best advice comes from a neutral point of view. He would be able to respect it and make it interesting without shoving it down our throats, but at the same time not shitting all over it. Because it would be from a neutral point of view that respects people's unique cultures and respects art. Yes, if Studio Ghibli made Narnia, it would feel Ghibli-ish, but I would rather it feel Ghibli-ish than just another Western studio just trying to make Lord of the Rings light, Harry Potter meets the Passion of the Christ, with a dash of 300 with Prince Caspian. I really would, because Hollywood can't handle it. Hollywood has such a concentration of Satanists and certain types of Jews. I'm not trying to throw all Jews under the bus, but certain types of Jews that it's like they can't respect anything that's Christian unless it's really emasculated and far left liberal, or if it's super far right and Zionist and used to recruit rednecks to send their kids into the meat grinder in the sandbox. Hollywood just can't respect it. And I don't want Hollywood to become like 1950s conformist Christian. That's bullshit too. I really don't. But the thing is that it's like, okay, I'm not a Greek pagan, but I'd like to kind of understand, I would kind of want somebody to kind of know what they're doing with a movie on Greek mythology. Would I want them to shove it down my throat? No. But would I want them to shit all over it? No. I would want them to understand it and appreciate it for what it is and what they can get out of it for the sake of entertainment and art, genuine art. And this is why I'm going to say that I think that we should have a bunch of Western shows or Western books that have been beloved by people but haven't gotten the respect it deserves. See if if certain companies, the right companies, could turn it into an anime, give it the anime treatment. I would love to see the people behind Studio Ghibli take a shot at making a good Narnia. If they took a couple of liberties with it, or had a couple of anime tropes kind of just, slip in through the cracks that might have been silly here and there, but it was otherwise a good TV series or movie series or miniseries, I'd be fine with that. Because it would still be more respectful than what a lot of Western companies can't do with their own shit. I would love it if an anime studio tried to turn Animorphs into an Adult Swim anime. No, not a Saturday morning cartoon, not a Dawson's Creek for teenagers, and sure as fuck, not a Disney movie. But if they actually tried to turn Animorphs into an Adult Swim anime, one that was TV-14, maybe even TV-MA, and if it kind of had like an alternating tone between like the more lighthearted points where the teenagers are socializing with each other and hanging out at school and have their human lives, it would be the lighthearted tones of Bleach. But the dark side, whenever they raid a Yerk compound, whenever they use their guerrilla tactics and go on sabotage and assassination missions against the enemy, that's when it would feel like Hellsing Ultimate. Not necessarily with what Hellsing Ultimate was about, but with the tone of animation and the tone of the theme, how it feels when you're watching it, how they act, the severity and the blood of it. I would love to see that if they got the right combination of Bleach and Hellsing Ultimate for Animorphs. There's anime about boy geniuses who are anti-heroes or criminal masterminds. They tend to be troporific, but here's the thing. I think the Japanese market could accept a challenge. And even though it would definitely be tainted by some stuff that would definitely let you know it was anime, I still think that they would do a more respectable and respectful job to the source material, even if they were allowed certain liberties and took their own twist on it. So I've even talked to another friend of mine who also likes Artemis Fowl, and even though he's a big Disney fan and he likes to see the best in everybody, he reluctantly had to admit that the Artemis Fowl movie was a disappointment. From what I understand, there's a graphic novel of Artemis Fowl, And you know how the books say that the goblins evolved from lizards? Like the goblins actually do look like ugly little dragons, so that actually makes sense. And the dwarf actually looks kind of like a mole. These are actually some really cool designs. I mean, the Atlantean fairies, it kind of looks like Jack 2, the Jack and Daxter games, how they went into a future and it was kind of like a British Iraqi third world country, a dystopia in Jack 2 and Jack 3. It kind of looks like a more well-off underground version of that. They could do that. They could do a good job. It's like they have an anime, and then if they just kind of did like the anime version of the style that was in that graphic novel, that'd be awesome. Because even if the Japanese maybe, had a character eat sushi instead of a sandwich, or if they made them do some of those weird honorifics that they do in Japan that we don't bother doing in the West, okay, so what? That's like a dog marking its territory. If it's a small detail, if it's a little something that just shows that it was made in Japan, but it's like I said, if the vast majority of it is loyal, or at least respectful, if its heart is in the right place, and if it has effort, and if it understands who it's aimed for, which is teenagers and young adults who don't need their freaking intelligence insulted, because if you do a good job, even if it's aimed at kids, adults are going to like it. So that's what I have to say with this. Please feel free in the comment section, if you feel so inclined, to tell me what TV shows or books or novels or comic books that you think aren't getting the respect they deserve in the West would do great with the anime treatment. With me, it would be Animorphs, Redwall, Narnia, Artemis Fowl, and even though Star Wars is kind of like this big media icon, and Disney has done some good things with Star Wars, mainly involving Dave Filoni, anything Dave Filoni works on consistently is usually pretty good. To me, that's Clone Wars and Rebels and The Mandalorian, and I liked Rogue One all right too. But the thing is that Disney in general is kind of mistreating Star Wars as a whole, minus the smart people like Favreau, Filoni, and Deborah Chow. So the thing is that I actually would like to see like an Adult Swim anime of Star Wars, maybe based on EU, or Dave Filoni making a TV series based off of EU, or the comic books that were written in the 80s, something. I could go into detail and talk about how, I think that there should be 2 TV shows. One is Star Wars Marvel. That one's more family friendly. It's based on the old Marvel comics and the new Disney canon Marvel comics. And then one would be Star Wars Dark, and it would be an Adult Swim anime of Star Wars, and it would focus on the Dark Horse comics and some of the Marvel comics that are really more mature in tone. And, maybe it would focus on the comics about Darth Vader. Maybe it would focus on the comics about the morally gray Rogue One. Maybe it would focus, on the gorier or darker side of Legends, which might include, like, the Yuzon Vong War. People have different feelings about that, but that's just an example. So please, if you're one of those people who, like, I don't worship anime, I think that Western animation has the potential to be superior, but even if it's like the tortoise beat the hare, even if Western animation has the potential to be better, Japanese anime is just kicking its butt, because Western media is kind of like the hare, and Eastern media is like the tortoise. It hasn't given up. It's kept going. It knew what its weaknesses were. So, by all means, I would love to hear in the comment section, if we had a little brainstorming session down below, just talk about, what sort of thing that the media in the West refuses to give credit to, whether it's a young adult novel or something that's mainstream even, then you think that it would do well with an anime treatment. I mean, quite frankly, there's a lot of things that get the shaft, but it would be cool to see if anime studios could make something that's Western in origin, and they alter it just enough to make it uniquely them, and that you can tell it's an anime, but they're still respectful to the material and they still do a good job with it. So yeah, feel free in the comments below. I want to hear your opinions on what franchises you think deserve the anime treatment, and also go into detail about what animation style you would want. Would you want it to kind of have the tone and style of Bleach? Would you want it to kind of have the tone and style of Naruto or Full Metal Alchemist? Feel free to throw that down in there, and I love to hear people's ideas whenever they think deeply about things that they love. All right, catch you later. Bye.